Welcome to The Inside Track, where we talk all things health, healthcare and medical insurance. Brought to you by TRA and our team of Warren, Alan and Doc Avron. Let's sit back and see what our team has for us today.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of The Inside Track. Unbelievably, we are on our 11th episode and we never thought that we'd get to this level. But Doc Avron, Alan, it's great to be here again, to come up with another podcast. I know we're going to have an exciting one today because this is our last one for 2025.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Incredible. And we've got some great information to talk about. I'll let you do that, and then we've got some exciting things about our social upliftment program that we've been talking about when we're done. So over to you.
Great. So we are coming up to the end of the year, and we know everyone's getting ready for their summer holidays.
Yes.
So we thought it's quite important. Let's look at skin cancer.
Sure.
We know that's a big issue in South Africa.
Yeah.
The incidence is growing exponentially, and we thought let's tap into a specialist, a specialist dermatologist, and see what's it with skin cancer. What's the incidence, what protection people can protect their skin, and how they go about looking after things.
Great. Looking forward to it.
And we're very fortunate to have Dr. Robert Weiss with us, who's a dermatologist specialist and has practiced for many years in this area. Just to say welcome and great to have you with us on the podcast today.
Yeah, hi, very nice to be here. Thanks very much.
Great. So today we're talking about skin cancer, but I think let's start off by understanding what exactly is skin cancer and how does it develop?
Right, so skin cancer is basically a type of growth that is unlimited. So if you leave it, it's just going to carry on growing. By definition, a malignant cell is essentially an immortal cell. So it carries on growing. It might not be life-threatening, but it's not something that's going to spontaneously disappear.
Right. So then I suppose it would be important to define for our listeners what the different types, let's talk about the major types of skin cancer. What's the most dangerous and how common is it in South Africa?
Okay, so let's start with the least dangerous. The least dangerous are, they're basically a couple of different types. The most common type that we see is something called a basal cell carcinoma. The sort of common name for that is a rodent ulcer. We see lots of those, a couple a day. So there are hundreds of thousands of those, sort of a purdy little spot that doesn't heal. They're locally invasive. They can cause a bit of damage in those functional areas, but otherwise we scrape them out. Occasionally they're neglected and they can be problematic. You need major surgery. The second most common is a thing called a squamous carcinoma from the sort of the surface cells. And they can be most of us have got these scaly little flaky things on our faces. White people get them from way back in our youth, cumulative sun damage over decades. And eventually a proportion of those may go on to becoming a bit more aggressive. They can be superficial again, but if they're neglected, they can be potentially harmful and they can metastasize to other parts of the body. And then the most dangerous and the one that everybody knows about is a thing called a melanoma, which is essentially from a pigment cell. So a pigment cell goes berserk and it spreads initially locally, a little brown, black or pink spot. And if that gets out of control, it can spread very widely to other organs and can certainly be fatal if it's neglected. So that's the critical one.
Right. And would that be the most important one to worry about, the malignant melanoma in your mind?
Well, I think all of them we need to worry about because the others are extremely common. Melanomas are rare. You want to avoid them, but you don't want to get basal cell carcinomas either. So yes, we want to worry about melanomas because they're going to kill you, but a tiny percentage of us are going to get them. A lot of us will get the others.
Right. So Robert, I've heard, and I just want you to correct this if it's right, that we have now recently overtaken Australia in terms of our incidence of malignant melanoma. Is that correct in terms? I know our incidence is very high in South Africa, but are we sort of a leading country in this in terms of skin cancer?
So the difficulty with that question is we don't have proper data. So we
Right.
don't even know how many we get. Yes, they are all reported to the National Institute. So theoretically, we got recording. Remember that melanomas are predominantly in a white population. Yes, you do
Right.
get them in darker skins. They're going to be slightly different. They're not sun exposed. They'll be under the feet, under the fingernails, or other areas, but they're going to be fairly rare in that population. So if you confine the incidence to percentages of the white population, we're certainly up there with the best of them. Australia, Miami, the States, and funnily enough, Scotland, of all
Right.
places, because they all go
Right.
to Spain on holiday, and they're all
Right.
white people.
Right.
So,
Okay, so it's significantly prevalent to be concerned about in darker skins. Is the concern of skin cancer also prevalent, or is it a worry?
it's not in the same league. So when it's there, and we see them occasionally on the palms and soles, they're often neglected because nobody kind of knows about them.
Right.
So they tend, the fatality is much higher, which
Right.
leads to this kind of misconception that moles under the hands and feet are terrible, they're dangerous, but we're looking at a different population group. So
Right.
I think if we confine skin cancers predominantly to the white population, those are the people who have to really worry about them.
Fine. But we're saying it's not that it doesn't occur in the black population groups. In other words, it does occur, it may be less common, and one should still
Yes.
be aware of it, right?
Absolutely. Different presentation completely.
Right.
So you're not going to get them on the face and upper back, for example. You're going
Yes.
to get them in the pale areas under the hands and feet and fingernails and so on.
Right. Can we talk a bit about the risk factors, right, and sun
Sure.
damage? So I'm talking about sun as a risk factor for increasing the risk of skin cancer, and what other risk factors increase the risk?
Right. So it's quite an interesting concept that we don't actually know. I mean, yes, we know that there are many more melanomas and other skin cancers in sunny areas. So Australia, where they all live at the coast, South African white populations are exposed to the sun, etc. But there's very little data, in fact, how you measure that. So the data suggests, however, that different types of skin cancers are due to different types of exposure. Melanomas seem to be related to severe episodes of sunburn in childhood, which sort of sets that pattern and damages the DNA for later evolution, whereas the other types of skin cancers tend to be more due to cumulative sun damage over a period of time. So we're looking at 30, 40 years before they evolve, but that's from ongoing exposure.
So we know about the sun, and we'll talk
So that's
about
the
that
sun.
in terms of how to
Right.
protect it.
Other areas, other things that may predispose, genetics. Not a strong correlation for melanomas, and nobody's going to ask you if you apply for a life insurance whether your father's had a melanoma, so that gives you an idea. Basal cell carcinoma is very frequently a familial association. And then immunosuppression. So people who are immunosuppressed by medication, for malignancies or whatever, some immune disease, or if they are just naturally immunosuppressed, are at a higher risk. So people like renal transplant patients and so on are very high risk for particularly basal and squamous carcinomas.
Okay, so in general, it's mostly the sun, right?
The sun's the one that we can, absolutely. That's
and
the
that
one
we
that
can
you got to be
mitigate the
aware
risk.
of.
Yeah.
And that's the one that you can prevent. I mean, we should be preventing that.
Yeah, and great. And we're going to unpack that shortly. But just before we get there, what are the, and this is probably very relevant for our listeners and viewers, how do we spot the warning signs, right? What should people look for on their skin? And is there a simple way for people to check their skin at home?
Right. So let's just unpack those three. Basal cell carcinomas, little pearly colored nodules, bumps or lumps that don't heal, they kind of erode, but if they haven't healed in 3 or 4 times the normal healing time for that part of the body, probably best to look it up. Squamous carcinomas tend to be scaly and flaky and break down. They're going to be almost exclusively in sun-exposed areas. So head and neck, sometimes lower legs if they expose. So those ones are a different category. The ones that we keep nagging about, and the ones you can read about in You magazine and whatever, are melanomas. So what are the warning signs? And the warning signs essentially are the evolution or development of a mole. It's not really a mole. It just looks like a mole that becomes bigger, blacker, irregularly colored, keeps on growing. But that's quite a subtle thing. It's not so easy to kind of know which of your 70 moles on your body is not a normal one. So that's all very well. And there are algorithms. So there's a thing called the ABCD criteria: asymmetry, irregular borders, multiple colors, diameter more than 5 millimeters. I don't like that. Because what happens, particularly where I work, is everybody's going to show you a mole because their friend's friend got a melanoma, and is mine dangerous? And you'll find it's a freckle or something. So that's not very helpful, because everything, if you had a look at your arm now, you'll find something which is irregular and atypical and so on. I think much more reliable is the ugly duckling approach. If you've got a whole lot of moles and one is out of place, I sometimes call them pick and pay moles. Is the lady behind you at Pick and Pay going to say, "Excuse me, have you had that looked at?" You know that there's something a little bit funny about it. Don't ignore it. But obviously, if you had an existing mole, it's been perfectly stable, and suddenly starts to leak pigment into the side, or starts to change color, or starts to become suddenly raised in isolation, whereas all the others are behaving themselves, that's a warning sign. And how do you monitor that at home? The great thing that we have now is cell phones, because we've all got them. And the reason you get married is because you've got somebody else who can monitor your back. So you take a cell phone, you take a picture, and you can do selfies of the rest. And if you're diligent, every 4 to 6 months, make a note in your diary, check skin day, and you compare notes and just see that they're behaving. We will get new moles until the age of about 40, 50. So everyone's going to develop things. But after that, in fact, moles start disappearing. So you shouldn't get new ones. You can get old age things, you can get warty things, but they're kind of different. But if you're developing a new mole over the age of 50, much more significant and variable and changing. And nowadays you can upload on internet and WhatsApp and all sorts of things, particularly with AI. You can take a picture of it and it'll give you an idea. Not always accurate, but it does certainly, that's evolving very rapidly.
Right, Robert. So great, and thanks. I think that's amazing advice. So we're saying if you have current moles, if there are any significant changes, and also if there's a mole that looks different to other moles. And I think that's a basic advice to use. Take a picture, see if things change. How often should one do that check at home of their moles? Let's say.
I say about 6 months. If you do it more often, you're going to get bored. You're not going to see changes. The changes are fairly subtle. So if you do it, let's say 3 monthly, it'll drive you more sugar. And secondly, it's not going to really, you're not going to see significant change. And you're not going to, so we don't even see, most patients, we don't see for a year, because maybe we're not going to see the change.
Right. So maybe that can lead into, at what point, when should one visit the dermatologist then? Okay, you've seen a mole, maybe it's changed a bit, you're not sure, etc. Okay. Would that be the point to see a dermatologist? And or how often should one see a dermatologist?
Okay, so this depends on accessibility. So let's say there are not so many dermatologists around and you've got to get in your car and drive for 6 hours, and not so easy. You're going to be a little bit more reluctant than picking up the phone and driving around the corner. And also whether the resources are available. I mean, most dermatologists are booked up for months and months and years even. So what's interesting is the European Dermatology Group has developed a set of criteria. Because most of the clinics are public and they don't want to be inundated with masses of people, they've developed a set of criteria and a checklist And they give you that list and you fill it in. And if you don't tick one of the columns, they say, ciao, go and have coffee, but you can't come here. You haven't got anything. So there are 6 main criteria, and they are the development of a new or changing mole, as we mentioned earlier. That could happen in anyone. So you've got to allow that.
Perfect. Yes.
A family history of a melanoma and 40 moles. I mean, not just a family history because your sister had one, that doesn't really count. You've got to have a lot of moles yourself. A personal history of a melanoma and maybe 10 to 20 moles because people get a bit anxious. Their risk is a bit higher. And then if you've got more than 80 moles, it becomes very difficult for your spouse to check 80 moles and take responsibility for that. So lots of moles. The other criteria are red hair, blue eyes, and freckles. So these Celtic Scots kind of sorts, because they're much more vulnerable. A history of breast cancer. The BRCA gene and the BRAF gene, which is the melanoma one, are very similar. So we like to check anybody who's had breast cancer because their risk is a bit higher, and we track those. So if you don't have one of those criteria, we kind of say, be aware, but don't stress. And I think the other thing to mention is, particularly where I work in the northern suburbs, we don't need to see kids. You're not going to get a melanoma under the age of 12. The risk is about 0.
Yes. So let me ask you this, because there is some literature data saying that if you're an adult, certainly a white adult with a white pale skin, that you should see a dermatologist X number of years for mole mapping, right? Would you say, how would you answer that in terms of what you just said, if you don't fall into any of those categories?
So I think it's very nice. It's a nice thing to have if you can, if you've got access to it. But if you've got 3 moles, you mole mapping it with your cell phone.
Right.
I mean, you don't need to pay somebody to go and put it on a screen.
Right.
We mole map where people have got lots of moles, where there's risk factors, as I've mentioned, and we're tracking subtle changes. Microscopically, not just macroscopically. So my approach really is to map people who are at risk, not just someone who has got a medical aid that says, well, our males will use it, let's just go be mapped. It's a waste of time and money. It's not
fine.
Really
okay, so what you're saying, if you have it, might be nice to have, but it's not an absolute requirement if you don't fall into any of those categories that you mentioned, high risk categories, and map it yourself. Let's just moving on, let's say that you catch skin cancer early, so you see this change in mole that comes back on one of the types of skin cancers you mentioned. What treatments are available, just at a very high level for our listeners?
Okay, so again, those 3 categories. Basal cell carcinomas, the locally invasive ones, either they'll be scraped out or locally cut out under local anesthetic, fairly simple. Only the difficult ones get referred on to plastic surgeons because they may be cosmetically problematic on the nose, eyelids, around the lips, for example, ears. Those are a little bit more problematic. But once you've cut those out, you get a pathology report. It says it's clear. That's it. We check again. There's a tiny recurrence rate, and you're at a slightly higher risk to get another one. So those individuals we check from time to time, certainly annually. Squamous carcinomas, it depends on the degree. People get very excited. They say, yes, they took this thing off. It was a squamous cancer. And am I going to die? No, you're not going to die, the bulk of them, unless they're really neglected. So on top of the scalp, and you've got this big ulcer, and you keep ignoring it because you hope it's going to go away. And 3 years later, your wife has a cadet and says, I'm booking for you. So those ones are a bit more problematic. The localized ones, they're usually removed in the same way, scraped off and burnt. And sometimes we use a form of chemotherapy, a topical thing. So there are 2 creams, one's called Eldara, another called Efudix, which you can rub on. And they do very well with those in superficial types. Otherwise, they get cut out. Melanomas, we always will take out the lesion initially. It'll be sent off to the laboratory. It'll be assessed. If the depth is either naught, in other words, in situ, it hasn't penetrated through the surface, we don't have to worry about it much. It's gone. it's a warning shot. You're kind of like, okay, you're a bit more vulnerable. Keep an eye on you a bit. If it's invasive, the depth of invasion is quite important. So when we get to 1 millimeter, actually 0.87, then we start to worry because the potential for it spreading increases. And we then have to look at other things, checking to see if it's in the glands and doing scans and having an oncologist monitoring and managing it as well. For the shallower ones, we monitor, and those are the people that we tend to map for A, because of their slightly higher risk, and B, because they're feeling more vulnerable and they need the reassurance.
Sure. So there are, for the most part, we can treat them. Obviously, in the rooms, the dermatologist rooms. Obviously, if it's spread, then it might need to go, and that's certainly the melanomas to an oncologist and further treatment there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I suppose the message there is catch it early, and that goes back to our previous point. If you are concerned that there is something significant or change, you should go see a dermatologist, right? Don't leave it.
So I don't. People send us WhatsApp pictures all the time.
Yes,
Is this spot
yes,
okay? I
yes.
won't respond to those because I'm
Right.
not prepared to take the risk that
Yes.
some little black spot that I see on a WhatsApp message, maybe a freckle, maybe a mole,
Yes.
maybe a tick bite, maybe a melanoma. So those, we prefer to scan them.
Yes.
We've got technology now that we can
Right.
get much better resolution. We've got a much better, higher chance of making a proper diagnosis.
Right. But I think with everything we've chatted, I mean, obviously skin cancer is an issue and it's significant, as we spoke about protection and prevention, right? What should people know about protection? And obviously sunscreens are part of this. There's a lot out there. What type of sunscreen should they be using?
So let's just go one step back. The critical time is before the age of 20. So your protection below the age of 20, 80% of your sun damage will be by the age of 20 because you're playing cricket and you're outdoors and you don't have to work and so on. So most of the damage is done there. So we have to be very vigilant with kids.
Right. And that's unfortunate because if I can just come in, a lot of the population don't know necessarily about that protection and maybe not so concerned about it before the age of 20.
So that's the critical thing is to be, as one gets older, by the time you get to 70, I get people, I'll tell you a funny story. One, my old professor used to get these couples coming in and invariably the wife would say, "Professor, will you please tell my husband to wear a hat and a sunscreen? He doesn't listen to me." And she would glare at them and say, "He's nearly dead. It's too late." So, we're more worried when you're young. And what do? Sunscreen should become a habit. It should be like putting your underwear on. I mean, it's just something you do every day. You brush your teeth, you put on a sunscreen.
Right.
There has been a debate recently, are they safe? So where does this story come from? So some researchers found sort of nanoparticles, microscopic particles of sunscreens in the bloodstream. Are they carcinogenic? Are they a problem? We don't know. I mean, we know there's no evidence that they are, but there is this slight concern. So the way that we've altered our approach, instead of just covering people in sunscreen, we recommend it's used on exposed areas only, head and neck, ears, forearms, etc. The rest of the body, particularly in kids who've got a high surface area absorption problem, we prefer to recommend caps and rash vests and shirts and sitting in the shade and try to be sensible about when you go in the sun. The main damage time is sort of between 10 and 3. So if you're going to go out running in the morning at 6, you don't need to put a sunscreen on, you get damaged at that time of the day. But children, we are quite strict with, and one should. And here, I think it's worth mentioning, it's not just white skin. This is everybody. And a lot of people with darker skin say, but I don't get sunburnt. And my reference is, well, look at a bushman. I mean, they spend their lives in the sun. By the time they're 30, they are incredibly wrinkled. Why? The ultraviolet light has damaged their skin and it's causing other things. So it's not just skin cancer, it's aging as well. You don't want to damage it.
Yeah, so maybe we missed that when we were talking the causes. The issue about the sun is the UV radiation, right?
Right.
So that is what you want to protect, and being exposed to. Am I correct with that?
Correct. So
Yes.
the 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 electromagnetic spectrum is quite broad, and the components of that spectrum that do the damage are called ultraviolet A and ultraviolet B. Ultraviolet B is what causes burning and probably causes the most genetic damage to the DNA, or one that's probably responsible for cancerous change. Ultraviolet A penetrates quite deeply. It also comes through glass. So if you're sitting in a cockpit in a plane, or if you're sitting behind a window in a car, whatever, you're still getting sun damage, but for deeper damage. We're not entirely sure what it's doing, but it's certainly going to cause damage. So this newer sunscreens, you said which sunscreens you recommend? We want sunscreens that cover both UVA and B, which means you need a fairly high so-called SPF factor, sun protection factor.
So what would be the minimum SPF factor that you would recommend?
So my own personal preference is 50.
Right.
I don't care who you are, what type of skin you are, what age you are. A 50 will give you the adequate protection for you and UVA and B. And remember, when they measure those factors, they measured in a laboratory at a certain depth in the skin, two microns depth. We don't put it on so uniformly. So let's say you have half that amount put on.
Yes.
You still got a 25. If you
Yes.
start with a 10 and you wipe half of it off, well, it's gone.
Right.
But no, and the other thing about sunscreens is they do wipe off, and people who are doing active sports, for example, or toweling their nails dry, you've got to reapply it.
Right.
You can't just hope you put it on in the morning before you went to the beach. You're going to burn by midday
Sure.
because you wiped it off.
So reapply the sunscreens, minimum SP50 if possible, and cover the other parts of your body with clothing, shade,
Preferably
hats,
shade.
etc.
And remember things, you also get reflective light. So sitting under an umbrella,
Yes.
yeah, it protects you from the sun on top of you, but it doesn't reflect you from the light reflected from the sand and towels and so on, and water in particular.
Right. Robert, it's been absolutely fascinating, and I think we can go on, and we'll definitely, hopefully, bring you back onto our podcast for future episodes. If you had to leave our listeners and viewers with one message just about skin cancer and protecting themselves, what would that be?
I think my message would be sensible. I never tell people don't go outside. I mean, we live outside, we live in normal life, but be sensible, use protective clothing, wear a cap, use a shirt, put on a sunscreen, particularly in children. Monitor your kids very carefully. And be aware of what you've got on your body. We have a big advantage. We can see skin. So if you're aware, you're going to know if something's doing something weird. You can prevent almost everything.
Robert Weiss, Dr. Robert Weiss, specialist dermatologist. Thank you so much for the time. It's been so informative, and thank you so much for being on our podcast today.
Thanks, everyone. Hope everyone has a good holiday.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Aid. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Well, that was fantastic. I mean, we all know the dangers out there. I mean, the sun gives us energy, but you got to be careful. And I mean, you're just knowing that there's so much that you can do. There's so much prevention that you need to take care of.
Yeah.
Just to be safe, you know. So
one has to be very mindful about it, right? And aware. When you're going into the sun, you actually have to protect your skin. And if you don't, you're going to face the consequences down the road. But if you protect your skin, you'll certainly decrease the risk. So I hope our listeners learned a lot then as they go into their summer holidays. They can apply a lot of that information.
Yeah, and of course the African sun is going to be at its hottest in months to come. So prevention is better than cure.
Yeah,
exactly right. So I'm sure our listeners will take a lot of info out of that.
Great. I think now let's move on to a topic that's really very dear to me, and that's our TRA social upliftment program. Our regular viewers will know that we do, in conjunction with the Border Icons of Sport, we support a couple of sporting events, and we're involved with the Celebrity Golf Challenge and things like that. But and also our relationship with Hot 102 FM is very important, where we support their Teddython and help them to raise lots of money that they use for social upliftment, and also those cases where people are really, falling on bad times, or there's medical issues and all the rest of it. So it's top of mind for us here at TRA. One of the things we've done is we got hold of one of these street vendors. The guy's name is Justice, and he works outside of Bryanston here in Joburg. And he makes models out of beads. All right.
Mm.
And I mean, that's his sole source of income. He makes these little models, sells them. And I mean, the quality of his work is outstanding. I'm going to show you. He's managed to do a gappy for us.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
that's
really smart.
Yeah.
that's smart.
That's impressive.
It is.
I mean,
Very, very
I
smart.
mean,
Excellent
that's what he
work.
did for us, and
Yeah.
these will be used to as gifts going forward. But the nice thing about doing it with Justice is that he's able to do other projects for us, and we'd just like to give him a bit of exposure. So you'll see his number appearing on the screen. All right. We're going to share a couple of his photos of what he already does. It's not too late to go and get your festive season models made
Mm.
and anything else you want. I'll give you a sneak peek into next year in that he's going to be doing the sculptures for the next DigiMag. And we're going to be using that as part of the sponsored prize. So he's doing the Big Five.
Yeah.
So we all know
Incredible.
about the Big
Yeah,
Five in
yeah.
South Africa, and he's doing that for us. So a big credit to this guy. I mean, he's taken really, your basic materials and he's created fantastic models out of it. So,
Warren, I think we should know. I mean, there's a lot of talent out there. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It's often overlooked, and I think just TRA going out and supporting local vendors.
yeah, it's
It's such a great story, and we look forward to doing more of that.
great.
Fantastic, Warren. It's really a good initiative.
And then I guess, it's our last podcast for the year. So as a bit of a wrap up, I wanted to ask us as a team, what do we take away from the Insight Track for this year? So maybe Alan, you want to kick off with what you
Yeah, thanks, Warren. I think the entire series was a fantastic series in terms of educating our policyholders, our prospective policy, and just educating Joe citizen out there. What was particularly for me quite nice is the education I received on pain management. It is quite easy, and I'm generalizing, for people to talk about back pain and think that they have to see a surgeon immediately. Now, if you see a surgeon, then you know that the operating table are waiting for you.
Yeah.
And what the specialists on pain management brought home to our podcast viewers is that you can manage pain, and you can manage pain effectively and live a comfortable life.
Sure.
Whether it's a documented based treatment but you can prevent surgery and just do the right things. And for me, that was most probably the learning experience for me out of our 10 podcast series. And as I said, generally, all of them were fantastic, quite educational. And I think our viewers would agree that we got real value out of real experts. I always say not internet or Facebook-based doctors, but real experts in the field of that they've studied and practiced. And I think Doctor will talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, I think before I hand over to you, Doc, if I can just say from just monitoring the podcast and seeing what it's doing in social media, it's incredible that just our little podcast has created debate amongst people in the public.
Yes.
We see it on Facebook, on Instagram, those sort of platforms. We see our people having watched the podcast and then commenting that this affects them or it's affected someone they know.
Yes.
Or they didn't think about it that way. So let's have an alternative view. So it's generated a lot of debate and interest amongst people.
100%.
And that's fantastic. That's really what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I think let me pass over to you because I know you've got.
Well, I want to actually take two parts. Well, first, I don't want to forget the gap cover part. And I think you've done a tremendous job in terms of educating the public on gap cover. And I presume some of the debate has been around that. And we found that there's a lot of education that has to have happened in the market. And we're starting that education discussion around gap cover. So that side of our podcast, I think, has been tremendously successful. And I think how we've tied it into the whole healthcare and medical side, which, of course, I'm passionate about, has been the winning formula. Sure. I mean, when we started this 11 episodes ago, we never really knew where this was going to go. No. And I think that mix has created the success of this podcast. And then particularly just going the medical topics, what's been the highlight for me is really being able to get to the experts, because there's a lot of stuff going on social media, but we can access the experts through TRA and our network, and getting the experts onto our podcast. And that's why we always go out to the listeners. Please tell us what topics you'd like to hear yourselves, and we'll get the experts and bringing them in really short, informative, bite-sized chunks to the public has been exciting. And I've loved chatting to the specialists, and I've loved the fact that we can bring the information to the experts. So that's been really exciting. And I think I just want to tell our listeners there's a lot more to come. This is just the start.
This is just the start.
This is just the start. We've got tremendous plans for next year. So that's been great. Just how we've mixed the gap cover and the medical, and bring the experts, and the response and the interaction discussion out there has just been so exciting.
I like what Dr. Everett is saying. It's so easy to go to Dr. Google and go research it. And there's a real danger to that, because the practitioners are there to assist. And I think bringing the experts into the podcast for our viewers is really a fantastic opportunity.
And I think we should realize we've got tremendous talent and expertise and knowledge with our healthcare practitioners in South Africa.
We do.
And just to bring them to our listeners, which they wouldn't so easily be able to get to, I think is really exciting.
No, absolutely. I think, when we started, we had those three sort of ideas in mind. Let's talk about the medical side. Let's talk about the gap cover side, and let's talk about the healthcare industry. And all of it affects the man in the street.
True.
So that consumer out there who wants that information, I mean, it's just almost been spoilt with info. So, I mean, I think it's fantastic. Look, it's a great way to end this podcast, but not only this podcast, our 2025 campaign.
But Warren, I think before we do that, you were going to give us ideas on some numbers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to end with some good numbers.
Okay, great. Looking forward.
We were almost at, for the playlist, for the Inside Track podcast as a whole, we're almost on 9,000 views.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Which is fantastic. And we've been working towards that. So, but what we want to do is say, please like the channel. Share the channel. Give us those likes and the follows and all the rest of it, because the more viewers we have, the more we can be involved and the more information we can bring you. So certainly, I'd like to wrap up with those great figures. I think from our side, we just want to, to all our viewers, just wish them a good break, a good festive season for those who are celebrating, and just a time to recharge and refresh. Because when we come back next year, we're coming back bolder, stronger, and a lot more content. We've written this sort of we've written this podcast and we've taken it to a great level. So, and I think the sky's the limit. So
exactly.
And please don't forget to be safe out there. It is the silly season.
Yes,
exactly.
You must behave. Make sure that you are safe, and make sure that you enjoy the festivities.
Yes.
Great. And I have two messages. One, obviously, please email us. The email address will go up in terms of either topics you want to hear, or just questions you have, or interesting areas you want covered next year. And the second thing is just take the time during the festive season and your break to think about your health. As I always say, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Plot some strategies in place for your health next year, and we'll certainly help you through the Inside Track with that information as we go into next year.
Right. So then on behalf of our team, and we mustn't forget Kim, she's our technical expert. You don't see her on this side of the camera, but she's behind. So
I think at some stage we've got to interview Kim.
At some stage we'll interview Kim.
We will do that. Maybe there you go. There's Kim. Great. Exactly.
There we go.
There you go. I've got to say, Kim's the best producer. Does an incredible job.
Yes.
We're really grateful to her on a weekly basis for getting the show out.
On that great note, we say goodbye, and until next year.
Great.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
See you well.
Don't stress, the gap is covered.
Well, there we go. Thank you to the TRA team and to you for watching the Inside Track. Until next time, bye for now.